By the end of 1966, American forces in Vietnam had grown to 385,000 men, plus another 60,000 sailors off Vietnam shores. As the force levels had risen, so too had the casualties. The year had seen more than 6,000 Americans killed and 30,000 wounded. The biggest problem for American commanders was that their timetable was slipping badly. By now, the Viet Cong should be losing men faster than they could be replaced. General Westmoreland had to concede that U.S. forces had come nowhere near achieving that goal. An estimated 61,000 Viet Cong had been killed in the past year, yet their troops had gone up to more than 280,000. Part of the problem was that the American bombing campaign against North Vietnam and its supply routes to the south was still failing. More men and materials were reaching the guerrillas than ever before. The Viet Cong had also stepped up their recruiting. There was one cause for optimism on the American side. Operation Attleboro had seemed to show the Viet Cong would fight if their base areas were threatened. The latest plan was to go back into War Zone C with even greater forces. But first, the Americans wanted to solve an immediate problem. The districts just in front of Saigon, the Iron Triangle and Cu Chi, were still major Viet Cong strongholds. The American plan was to attack into the Iron Triangle with more than 2 divisions. The guerrillas would be trapped in their own base areas and annihilated. At the same time, another attempt would be made to capture the Viet Cong Saigon military headquarters. The whole area would then be systematically destroyed. Before the attack, American aircraft dropped 20,000 leaflets telling the population to leave at once. The Iron Triangle was an area of 60 square miles lying between the Saigon River and Route 13, with the village of Ben Suc on its western side. A major Viet Cong tunnel complex ran under the whole district. The 272nd Regiment of the NLF was operating there, along with 2 battalions of NLF Main Force, 2 independent NLF battalions, and the Phu Loi Battalion. But on the eve of the American offensive, most troops were withdrawn. Only local NLF companies were left to defend important installations. The American plan for Operation Cedar Falls was that the 25th Infantry Division and other units would occupy blocking positions on the western side of the Saigon River, forming an anvil. The 1st Division and the 173rd Airborne Brigade would assault from the north and the east, with a battalion landing at the village of Ben Suc. Meanwhile, the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment would act as the hammer, smashing through the center of the triangle. Operation Cedar Falls opened with 4 days of attacks by B-52 bombers. Artillery and airstrikes followed, and a wall of fire was laid down to cut off the NLF's retreat. On January 8, 1967, 16,000 U.S. and 14,000 South Vietnamese Army troops moved out of their bases in fleets of helicopters, armored personnel carriers, trucks, and boats. In the first hours of Operation Cedar Falls, the village of Ben Suk had been captured with barely a shot fired. The local company of 100 NLF fighters had been taken completely by surprise. As the village's 6,000 inhabitants were rounded up for interrogation, bulldozers began to level every building in sight. The American operation to smash the Iron Triangle lasted 19 days. With only local Viet Cong left to defend the area, and most of those hidden in tunnels, there was almost no heavy fighting. American losses were 72 killed and 337 wounded, mostly to snipers and booby traps. In Ben Suk and in the Tan Dien forest, the Americans uncovered dozens of tunnel entrances. By now, they were better prepared. Specialists, known as tunnel rats, had trained to go down tunnels and explore. In the cramped spaces underground, they faced gunfire, booby traps, and mines. The problem was, there were only a handful of tunnel rats, and the complexes were enormous. Whenever tunnels were found, the Americans made determined efforts to destroy them. Demolition charges, explosive gas, and flooding were all tried. Riot control agents were pumped in to try and force the Viet Cong to come out. Nothing really worked. The tunnels were designed so that neither gas nor water could penetrate far. The Americans had discovered only a small number of the Viet Cong installations hidden in the Iron Triangle. But those they did find yielded astonishing quantities of material. There was enough rice to feed 13,000 guerrillas for a year, along with over 7,000 uniforms, a huge underground hospital, and over a ton of medicine. 500,000 documents were discovered, including detailed maps of air bases and the private addresses of Americans in Saigon. Some U.S. commanders immediately hailed Cedar Falls as a major success. Westmoreland was much more cautious. The main NLF military headquarters had not been found. Neither had any sizable enemy unit been brought to battle and destroyed. In the end, 720 Viet Cong had been killed for the loss of 72 Americans. One aim of Operation Cedar Falls was achieved. The Iron Triangle was completely and utterly destroyed. After its inhabitants were moved out to refugee camps, the district was turned into an uninhabitable wasteland. Huge Rome plows cut 20-foot wide avenues crisscrossing the forest to make any movement instantly visible from the air. These massive machines could plow the tallest trees into the ground. 60 square miles of forest near Saigon were plowed under in the Iron Triangle. Afterwards, Operation Ranch Hand aircraft sprayed lethal defoliants to destroy the jungle cover and make it impossible to grow crops. After the Americans had pulled out, almost the whole of the Iron Triangle was designated a free fire zone. Artillery or bombs could be rained down at will, and anyone that moved could be attacked from the air. Yet to the astonishment of the Americans, within weeks of Operation Cedar Falls, the Viet Cong were active again in the Iron Triangle.